All right, so we're gonna be kicking into our React ND segment for this week. If you are watching on the YouTube in the future, remember that the way you recommend videos that show up on the channel is to put them in the React section, the Bran Reacts channel in my Discord. That will be down in the description below for you guys. If you guys are not in the Discord in the current recording with Twitch, there's the link. Today we're going to be watching, to start off with, Ardetha's History of Tinker video, which Ardetha does very, very amazing and fantastic videos covering the history of different perks, maps, even events in Dead by Daylight, like that terrible, terrible tournament that happened. So yeah, you should definitely, because they make such fantastic content, click that link that just showed up above my head in the Twitch chat if you're in, if you're on the YouTube side of things in the future. It'll be down in the description below. Make sure you like and subscribe to support the official release of the video, or else you're a freeloader and I hate you. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into this video.
There have been plenty of hated perks in Dead by Daylight for a variety of reasons. Reason one being that the perks were ridiculously overpowered, like Original Decisive Strike, which would effectively grant all 4 survivors a 4th life, as it didn't matter if they had been hooked previously and didn't have any tie-in with the obsession. It would always proc with no prerequisites with an almighty 5-second stun time,
which is forever.
Or Original Metal of Man, which effectively gave survivors 3 health states for free, as it stacked on regular hits instead of protection hits. Or Original Undying, which effectively gave the killer 5 ruins, 5 devour hopes, or any other.
I feel like people don't talk about this enough. When they talk about OP stuff in DBD's history, Undying always isn't brought up in conversation. And this was like what was most prevalent like when I started playing, because that it was either the anniversary or the fall was when Blight came out of the year I started playing, and that was the Ruin Undying meta, and that's when that came into effect, and that was disgusting. Having to find all 5 totems on the map to get rid of a hex, that was disgusting. That was disgusting. No, Undying Devour. No, I'm assuming you mean Devour by that. No, it didn't carry stacks, but the fact that you had to snipe the totem 5 times meant that you were probably building the stacks back up to be able to, you know, get the exposed back anyways. Is how that usually worked. There was an old build I used to use on Ghostface called Mom You Can't Make Me stock, and I used Old Undying Devour, and it worked pretty well, even though the stacks got lost whenever they pop it, because like I said, by the time they'd find it again, I'd already have 3 stacks back. So it's like, yeah. And the Stinky is talking about, it used to also come with aura reading. Like this perk used to be disgusting, absolutely disgusting. And I never hear it brought up in like perks that used to be OP conversations. It's always the, you know, the prime suspects, Dead Hard, DS, stuff like that. But I never hear Undying brought up, and it is 100% an old demon of Dead by Daylight.
Which effectively gave the killer 5 ruins, 5 devour hopes, or any other hex perk they wanted. Reason 2 being that they straight up broke the game as a whole, like Original Balanced Landing, which straight up made survivors unkillable on certain maps, or Old Dead Hard, which, aside from being incredibly strong, also allowed survivors to glitch into God mode spots on certain maps. Or reason 3, they were simply annoying, like Franklin's Demise, or I'm sure you could name a few yourself. Now of course, many of these perks did end up getting changed, whether it was absolutely needed like Original Decisive Strike, or somewhat questionable like some of Self-Care's
self-care.
But the reason for most, if not all of these changes, can be boiled down to them being either far too overpowered, too frustrating, or having a tremendously high pick rate. However, there is one single perk that stands out from the crowd. One perk that transcends the hatred of us mere mortal players and went so far as to frustrate the developers themselves, and that was none other than the original version of Tinkerer. At first thought, it may seem bizarre.
And we're going to be talking about original version of Tinkerer, but like, hey, Tinkerer going off on a gen every single time it was 70% was also a very obnoxious version of this perk. That what they changed it to afterwards was still fairly obnoxious. That a killer could just permanently know whenever a gen was close to finishing was just way too much info. Like way too much info. Can't change my mind. It was not based.
To cause issues.
It was not based. And basically, any killer you had it on that had map mobility could just permanently stop you from finishing a gen. You remember that? Can you imagine that stuff on Xenomorph, my main character? With my tunnel system, a gen would never get done. Yeah, that's an exaggeration for entertainment purposes, of course. But like, it would be, I could just guard a gen if I wanted. Just pop, pop, pop. Just every single time I know exactly where to deliver my pop over and over and just complete a gen from getting done. Well, you know, there's something to be said about this now, actually. Hold on. I talked myself into the other end of the conversation. Since a gen can only be kicked a max of 8 times, that would not be a problem in modern day DBD. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, with modern DBD, with the new change, you can only kick that same gen 8 times. So if Old Tinkerer was in 2024 DBD, it would be not as much of an issue.
Issues for the devs. It's a fairly simple perk, really. Not too OP, not too weak, and I mostly only ever see Tinkerer on bubbers.
Yeah, just be in a Swift on comms, dude. Just never ever solo queue or even duo queue. God, idiot. Come on. Just split gens. Come on. Yeah, just fucking be in a Swift, dipshit. God, that's your fault. Just play better, dummy. Okay.
To secure some cheeky surprise chainsaws. To be fair, it was sometimes irritating to play against back when it could proc infinite times on every gen, but fixing that was hardly the hardest thing the devs have ever done. So how did Tinkerer cause issues for behavior? Well, Tinkerer as you know it today is very different to how it used to be. The perk hasn't just had numerous buffs and nerfs over the years, and instead got completely reworked, with the current version sharing absolutely zero similarities with the old one other than name. So what exactly did old Tinkerer do? Well, for starters, it had absolutely no interaction with generators or terror radius. Instead, its function was this. Add-ons that affect the charge time of your power are 15% more effective.
Which was very strong.
After 6 months it got nerfed down to 10%, but the effects would change from multiplicative to additive, which actually meant that it was a huge buff. So instead of increasing
which probably was like, knowing behavior was probably not on purpose. Like, knowing behavior, they're probably just like, oops. Like, it was probably not on purpose knowing them. Yeah, probably not on purpose knowing them. Probably just,
effective. Well, after 6 months it got nerfed down to 10%, but the effects would change from multiplicative to additive, which actually meant that it was a huge buff. So instead of increasing an add-on's effectiveness by 10% of its original value, it just straight up adds an additional 10% to that value, which is where it remained until its eventual rework. Now, a perk dedicated to simply buffing your add-ons sounds actually quite nice on paper, but unfortunately old Tinkerer was nowhere near as interesting as you'd think, most likely due to it only affecting charge time add-ons, which were some of the most boring add-ons available. Want to amplify the effects of Dead Rabbit to get an even smaller terror radius on Michael Myers? Sorry, no dice. Want to amplify the effects of Deerskin Gloves to reload even faster as Huntress? Nope, not allowed. Want to amplify the effects of the Insta-Rev add-ons to be even instanter? Go crazy, rev as fast as you like. And that marks the beginning of Tinkerer's problems, as the only add-ons it was designed to work on were some of the community's least favorite
ones that were already really good.
Whether you're a veteran player or still fairly new, I'm sure you've heard of people talking about old Insta-Rev on Billy, which was basically the only controversial part of pre-nerf Billy. Speaking of which, halfway through making this video, the devs announced that they will be turning Billy's overheat into a feature that empowers him instead of punishing him, finally. What the controversial Insta-Rev combo did was severely reduce the amount of time it took Billy to begin chainsawing, and in turn removed a decent chunk of counterplay for survivors where they would have previously been able to reach a pallet or window if Billy had default charge speed. But with Insta-Rev, his chainsaw would start too quickly and it would result in downs that felt pretty unfair.
Now they just give that as powers to killers. Now they just give that to killers in their base kit, so.
And what do you know? That was the only combo that Tinkerer was designed to work on, making that frustrating and hated combo even stronger. This also applied to Bubba, who originally shared 100% of Billy's add-on,
which is weird,
alongside Huntress with her insta wind-up combo too, which was also hated as it too removed a big window of counterplay for survivors. Also keep in mind that the Huntress's insta wind-up combo, which I'll also call insta-rev as it's easier to say, used to be even faster than it is now, as Mana Grass Braid used to be 10% faster.
And let me be clear, somebody who like my first true main, outside of just like my favorite being Myers, like my first like character I got good with being Huntress that I made for a while, like Babushka's still dumb. Like Fire Babushka is still bullshit. like there are certain instances where like there just like is no counterplay. Like you just cannot get out of the way, man. Like it's just reactable, and people react to me all the time, but it is incredibly strong. Yeah, Rose Root Babushka is just so disgusting. It is a very, very gross add-on combo. Like it literally makes her playable on indoor maps because you could just hit people before they get around the corner. It literally makes her almost like Xenomorph, just as hatchets, except the problem is that Xenomorph only has 4.8 meters of range, whereas Huntress obviously can hit you anywhere she sees you, which is very, very good.
Instead of today's 8%, and Flower Babushka was a whopping 20% faster. With those already high numbers being amplified by a further 10% with Tinkerer, insta-rev on any character became incredibly oppressive. I'd argue that Insta-Rev and Tinkerer were far more oppressive on Huntress than Billy and Bubba, but it wasn't talked about as much because people were far more concerned with iridescent heads, which was absolutely bonkers with how OP it used to be, which I'll save for another video. I've been saying designed to work on because the perk description explicitly stated it specifically worked on charge time add-ons, but that wasn't strictly true. For instance, Tinkerer not only affected Trapper's faster trap setting add-ons, but also strong coil spring and 4 coil spring kit, which had nothing to do with charge speed and instead made it take longer for survivors to disarm and sabotage his traps.
That's weird.
These weird inconsistencies were not exclusive to the Trapper, far from it in fact. While some add-ons specifically had a line in their description stating affected by Tinkerer, it really wasn't as simple as that, because there were plenty more add-ons that had no official mention of working with Tinkerer, yet they still did. For example, the aforementioned Insta-Rev Huntress. That's right, Mana Grass Braid and Flower Babushka were not supposed to have any interaction with Tinkerer whatsoever. In fact, the last killer that officially supported Tinkerer was the Doctor, with it further increasing the passive madness gain for survivors in his terror radius when using add-ons that had that effect. If you don't understand what I mean by that, don't worry, it's to do with his old kit, which I'll also cover in a future video. Another example would be the Pig, where some of her add-ons that affected the charge time of her dash also worked with Tinkerer, even though they weren't supposed to according to their description. This is likely related to the notorious code recycling the Pig had, where in development they duplicated the Huntress and used her as the base for the Pig while developing.
This is still the weirdest thing in DBD. I think it's one of the weirdest things in DBD history. The Pig is just, code-wise, almost exactly the Huntress. Why is Pig the Huntress code-wise? Like, it's just so bizarre. Like, it's just like a thing, and like, I think it's something you could put on like a quiz show, you know, like, because nobody would believe it. Like, you tell 2 truths and a lie. Tell 2 truths and a lie, and you'd say this one, you'd be like, okay, clearly that's a lie. It's like, nope, it's a truth. Like, what? So bizarre.
Developing her, which is likely why Tinkerer affected the Pig's add-ons too, as they shared the Huntress's code. That being said, I'm sure you all have one question in mind. Why was the Doctor the last killer developed with Tinkerer in mind? Was Tinkerer's rework right around the corner, so they figured there's no point working around it when it's about to be changed anyway? Nope, it took a little while for Tinkerer to get changed. So why did they abandon it then? Well, it turns out that Tinkerer added a lot more development time for each killer release, and the sheer amount of time and iterating it took to keep this perk supported just wasn't wasn't worth it to them. The main reason was said to be balance, as they had to find an incredibly sweet spot where an add-on would still be impactful at its base value, but not
be OP with
overpowered
Tinker.
when you add a flat 10% on top of it, which was kind of an impossible task in my opinion. In a lot of instances, a difference of 5% can make or break an add-on, let alone 10%. For instance, imagine if Clown's Bleach add-on made survivors 9% slower instead of the current day 4%.
That'd be terrifying.
Nuts, let alone 14%.
So many ads in this game would be terrifying.
You don't need to imagine. Tinkerer and Insta-Rev on Huntress, Billy and Bubba was all the proof you needed. Outside of balancing, each add-on would have to have Tinkerer's effects manually added into its code. Keep in mind, it wasn't something as simple as any add-on with a percent effect has its percentage increased. They specifically only wanted add-ons that affect charge time to be enabled. So Tinkerer couldn't just have a blanket check for whether or not an add-on is percentage based. They instead had to pick and select each.
Chucky with old Tinkerer would be literally like that would rival Nurse. I'm not like, which Scamper and Instant Slice and Dice would actually rival Nurse. Like, I am not kidding. I am not exaggerating. That would literally be the only thing that would ever like be on par with her. You imagine that? That would literally be hacking. That would literally be cheating. Drop pallet, Scamper. Are you not directly on top of the pallet? Boom. Slice and dice. Oh my gosh. Homie would like actually not have counterplay at all. Like, oh my gosh. There's an alternate dimension somewhere, an alternate reality where this is happening and people are quitting Dead by Daylight by the thousands. The game is actively dying in an alternate reality because that exists, because there is old Tinker Chucky. Ooh, I'm glad that's not our reality. Oh man.
One by hand, unless they were copying and pasting the add-ons and having the code for Tinkerer carry over by accident, which alone meant doing another pass on their add-ons. They had to actually make all of the killer's add-ons, then pick and choose which one's effects were worthy of having Tinkerer, then go through and balance all the add-ons, which took significantly longer on any of the ones that were integrated with Tinkerer, so I can definitely understand why they decided Tinkerer just wasn't worth keeping around. So if the Doctor was the last killer to be developed with Tinkerer in mind, that means Tinkerer was abandoned only 11 months after Dead by Daylight's release, not quite making the 1 year mark. I mentioned that it took a little while for Tinkerer to eventually get
doesn't work on the charges though.
So just how long did it take?
Spirits does.
1 entire year. Well, the perk was abandoned after 11 months, so its rework basically only took 1 month, which is actually pretty good. Wrong. It was an entire year after it was abandoned before it was finally reworked. So technically, it took 2 entire years for Tinkerer to get reworked, officially supported for—
This is why when people say like DBD's in its worst state it's ever been and like behavior doesn't care about what we're saying, like, do you see how long it used to take to get certain things fixed in this video game? Do you see how long it used to take to have things actually get fixed that were super problematic and terrible in this game? You want to go back? You want to go back? You want to go back? Go. You can have it. Like, you can have it. Go for it, dude. If you prefer that for some odd reason, yeah, go back to that. Go back to having something take 2 whole years to get fixed. Man. We're living the high life comparatively. Holy moly.
11 months, abandoned for 13. So, in update 2.1.0, on the 24th of July 2018, Tinkerer would finally be reworked into the perk you're familiar with today, albeit slightly different to today's balance, with the perk activating when a gen reaches 85% completion instead of today's 70%, giving killers less of a chance to interrupt the gen's completion, particularly when multiple survivors were working on the gen together, alongside the perk being free to reproc an infinite number of times on every gen. Original Tinkerer was perhaps the biggest burden to the dev team that we've ever seen from a perk. Ultimately, the complete rework of the perk was completely justified as it added an unreasonable amount of extra work and dev time and pushed some of the most frustrating add-on combos to the extreme. That being said, I would love for something similar to come back into the game.
You sure about that? you sure about that? After everything that you just explained, are you sure about that? Like, after everything that we just talked about, that we just went through, you want to bring that back? Yeah, think about the Chucky conversation we just had. Are you? Hold on. Okay. Well, hear him out. Hear him out. Let's not throw stones too early. Let's hear him out.
Remove the restriction of it only working on add-ons that affect ability charge time and instead make it work on any add-on that has a percentage effect. And instead of making it a 10% additive bonus, perhaps try making it a 25% multiplicative bonus, or whatever number would be balanced. Then throw it into the public test build.
I feel like this would still be a nightmare. There's going to be some add-on that you're not thinking of that just suddenly becomes incredibly busted. This becomes absolutely insufferable that you're not thinking of. like there's, you just can't do that. And then it creates the exact same situation, right? Where like devs are having to make exceptions for certain add-ons, which, you know, in turn affects the way they develop every single killer add-on kit from that time out. And then, you know, after you introduce that, you're gonna have to go back through all the 34 killers that are currently in Dead by Daylight and make sure that all works, and either rework their add-ons or change the perk. Like, you're just putting yourself in the same situation. Ooh.
See if it's fair or not. I know it may sound absolutely wild at first thought, but a lot of the problem combos like Insta-Rev Billy and Bubba are gone now, and occupying a perk slot is a pretty big sacrifice, so the benefits should be justified.
No.
Lastly, by changing it from an additive bonus to a multiplicative bonus, it would affect all add-ons equally. For instance, a 25% bonus speed add-on with Tinkerer.
But not all add-ons are made equal. So having that multiplicative bonus would be
granting a 10% bonus would come to 35% if it were additive like it used to be, or 27.5% if it were multiplicative, which is much fairer.
It is, but it's still, I just wouldn't. I would like to say, maybe you just leave it. Lee, thank you so much for the follow, friend. I very much appreciate that. Hope you're doing well today. Yeah, I feel like with the amount of problems that it has caused in its previous form, let's not even risk it. Let's not even risk it. Let's not even put that out there. Let's not do that. Because that would create all kinds of havoc. All kinds of havoc. Oh man. Let's not and say we did. Yeah, there's some alternate reality out there where this actually went through, and then like there's like a mother-daughter ring spirit just like blasting people and stuff like that. Oh my gosh, that's inviting all kinds of issues that I would not want in the game. Well, yeah, Tinker used to be something else. I think it is in a good spot where it is. It is helpful, but not too strong. Definitely not creating that massive issues or being that overpowered. So let's take that as a lesson to never ever do that again.